it, yeah, I get, okay.
No.
Is it gonna?
I thought you said, do I have?
Is this gonna come up on the screen, Colleen? Because I don't need to have it here. Okay, fine. If you're happy with that, I'm happy with that. Okay. Are you guys ready to go?
Yes, you can have it.
That's what I want to know. And he laughed. He told me to.
Ready?
Unroll it when we get to it.
Okay.
It's in my way.
I'd like to call to order this meeting. This meeting for the Legal and Finance Committee for the City of Rapid City on January 12th at 12:30 p.m. First up, Robin, is roll call and determination of quorum.
Drew.
Here?
Lehman. Here. Nordstrom.
Here.
Weifenbach.
Here.
Solomon.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next up is the adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Lehman, second by Nordstrom. All in favor? Aye. The agenda is adopted. Okay, general public comment. And this is a time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda. Action will not be taken at the meeting on any issue not on the agenda except by placement on the agenda by unanimous vote of the council members present. I see we have quite a few people here, but I have no speaker requests, so am I to take that you don't care to speak? Okay. I just need to make sure. Okay, and then director's comments. Do we have any director's comments before we go into consent items?
Thank you. We have item number 1 on the agenda. It's on consent. We would ask that that be pulled and allow Michelle to make a brief presentation.
Sounds good. Let's see here, finance officer. Oh, finance director, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to really point out on number 10, under consent for finance, that this item is usually required by the second meeting in July, but we had the information, so I thought I would just bring it early. Looking at that, we've paid off a few of our tax increment districts, and we were actually projected to pay off an additional 4 in 2022, and then we can dissolve those and get those back on the tax rolls.
I might still pull that one just because I'd have more questions on that, so thank you very much, Pauline. Okay, seeing no other requests from director, oh, fire chief, okay. Fire chief. Oh, do we have the
I'm
wrong-
the acting fire chief now.
All right, Ron Weifenbach,
Denied.
fire chief.
Thank you. We need a couple new fire trucks and, actually, are we pulling items yet, Madam Chair? I might have got ahead of myself.
You did a little bit, but let's just go ahead and do that. The directors had no more comments except
I'll
for
pull
the
item-
fire chief.
I'm gonna pull item number 3,
Okay, got it?
and I wanted to make sure we had conversation about the, redistricting. I'm not sure which item that's.
That's not consent.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other lights, I'm going to pull 10, and so we need a motion to approve. Okay, excuse me? Did you,
Are we pulling number 1?
are,
Thank you.
yes. Okay. Okay, so we have a motion to approve the rest of the consent items with the exception of 1, 3, and 10. Motion? Motion by Nordstrom, second by Lehman, all in favor? And the agenda's passed. Anyway, with number 1, report on Community Investment Committee process for making recommendations for Cdbeg funding, Michelle Schulke, and that was a request by Richie Nordstrom. So welcome, Michelle, and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. As mentioned, this was a request by Councilman Nordstrom. This is a presentation to discuss the strategies and the methods implemented by the Community Investment Committee to address the high priority needs of the city through the CDBG program. That's the general outline of this presentation today. More complex training, which we call CDBG 101, that's conducted in the fall in concurrence with the annual application cycle. So this, again, is more about the process and the methods that the investment community goes about in making those recommendations that go to council for CDBG funding.
Michelle, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. So we get used to city speak here, so please just tell us about CDBG funding, where it comes from, what it is.
Of course, CDBG stands for Community Development Block Grant Funding. It's a federal fund, federal program in which the city of Rapid City is considered an entitlement community. And so if the reports and the documentation is submitted, as our division does on an annual basis, the city will receive CDBG money every year. The amount is determined by HUD. This is a U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development program. And again, it's on a formula basis, but in general, we receive between $500,000 and $550,000 every year.
Thank you for that.
Of course. The Community Enrichment Division is tasked with setting strategies and plans. The planning process really serves as a framework to involve the community members, stakeholders, the public. There's a lot of listening sessions involved in this strategic planning, and it really addresses, it helps with a community-wide dialogue to determine which priorities the city will be working on through the community development program. The process results in a 5-year strategic plan. We do have flexibility to do that planning every 3, 4, or 5 years. We could decide on that, but we have landed on a 5-year strategic plan because it coincides with a lot of other strategic plans, particularly with the state of South Dakota Housing Development Authority's strategic plan. It seems to coincide really well with their 5-year allocation and development of their plans. So with that 5-year strategic plan, we develop an annual action plan every year that sets really how we go about that on an annual basis for 5 years. The plan details high priority needs, expected outcomes, and really how much CDBG funding is expected to be used in meeting those outcomes. The current plan carries us through March of 2023. I would like to note that we've achieved our goals for the public service and public facility component of the program already, even though we are going through March of 2023, but we are chronically underachieving our affordable housing goals. We'll be pulling up a slide that shows the members, the committee members. It's comprised of 7 members, 5 voting, 2 alternates, and members can be seen on the screen that will continue through the end of this presentation. The task of the committee is to review the applications and make the funding recommendations to Common Council through the selection of subrecipients. I do want to note that there are a lot of great organizations doing very good work in the community. However, our division is not tasked with giving money away to these organizations, but rather setting those strategies, setting the high priority needs, and choosing the best partners, which we call subrecipients, to carry out the goals of the city. The committee recently implemented an LOI process, and that's followed by a formal application. So they deliberate on all the LOIs and the applications that come forward. And the idea is that the abbreviated process with the LOI helps the committee see what type of projects might be wanting to apply. We can have conversations with them so they have an understanding of what the program requirements might be, and they can choose to apply from there. They do this through a method, really 3-phase. 1, does the activity meet a national objective of the program? So does it serve low, moderate income individuals, address slum and blight, or is an urgent need? So an urgent need in this program is more like a fire, a flood, or a pandemic. Is it eligible? Is the activity eligible under the program? And then is the expense eligible? And of course, does it fit the high priority needs? So does the community feel like this is a high priority need through the city, through that strategic process? Additionally, they look and see if the goals are clearly defined, Is the cost reasonable? And do they have an established method for qualifying the beneficiaries? Most likely, do they have a way to document income of the beneficiaries? Furthermore, the committee evaluates the capacity of the organization. Have they considered how much time it will take, how many resources they'll need to allocate towards the project or program? They also need to factor in how long the project will take. And are there financial systems in place with the organization? Do they have effective control over the funds or the assets that are purchased with the CDBG funds? They look at the internal controls, policies, procedures, really to understand the capacity of the organization. And then lastly, they look at the program-wide obligations of the city. So, for example, we have a public service cap of 15%. Every year we can't allocate more than 15% of the funds for public services. And we have an obligation to spend the funds in a timely manner as well. So those are program-wide factors that they look at. Selecting the the perfect subrecipient is not a realistic goal, but we really do work on choosing the best partners to carry out the programs, and our division is tasked with providing technical assistance to help them achieve those goals. We have several members of the committee in the audience today, and at the end of this presentation, our chair, Ms. Hamburg, as well as Alan Solano and Jamie Tennis will wrap up this presentation, and then we'll stand for any questions. Liz?
Good afternoon, everybody. I just would like to point out that the CDBG dollars they require a lot of work. They're very restrictive, they're very specific, and so the grantees have to have the capacity to really provide the reporting that's needed for these dollars to go out. One of the things that we have done in the past year is go to this LOI process in order to continue to lay out a wide net so that people know about this opportunity, but it also helps us to define, does the work fit into the dollars that we've got, and does that organization have the capacity to really provide the reporting that Michelle is going to need? So we have a LOI process that is posted publicly, Rapid City Journal, Native Sun News. We also have, Michelle sends out a list of 254 recipients with a listserv. And then we also have several of us on this committee that are funders and can identify work that's being done that we believe might be a fit, and we can encourage people to apply as well. Once we have the LOIs, we had 13 with this previous round, so we are getting good representation across the board as far as interest, but then we can take those, look at the goals we have, and really help to define who is most likely to be able to fulfill the needs for these dollars, and then and also fulfill the goals that we have for these dollars. So we review all of the LOIs as well. We invite applicants, and then we review the applicants before anything is recommended. And I'll turn this over to Alan.
Good afternoon, Alan Solano. And I just wanted to share maybe just a little perspective in terms of maybe approach and some of the things that I would look at and kind of in reviewing these applications. And as Liz had said, you know, I come from a foundation, so we know a lot of what's going on in a lot of the nonprofit community and those types of things. So we're able to leverage that knowledge coming forward. But as Michelle had indicated, you know, the CDBG funds are pretty, pretty consistent, but maybe limited, you know, at that 500,000. So when we're looking at some of our goals, in particular the affordable housing development, that becomes a really kind of a tall ask when you're talking about 500,000, and by the time you take administrative and some of the service things, you're really looking maybe closer to 350,000 a year. That's available. And the reality and what we found is, you really, it's hard to spur affordable housing development with $350,000. So I really look at it in maybe a little different light, and I want to shed light on that. So what can we actually accomplish with a $350,000, or maybe it's a $500,000 investment into an affordable housing project? That has to be layered. The CDBG funds themselves is not going to create the affordability, but what we're able to do with these funds is really purchase affordability. So it's really not developing the rental unit or the affordable house, but it's really purchasing the affordability for a long period of time. So to give you an example of that, of a recent project, that was guaranteed to have affordability on 30 units for 30 years. So when you think about, or when I think about what we're investing and what we're purchasing, that's where my mind goes to is, hey, we're really looking at trying to get 30 years of affordability on 30 units. And then that starts making some of that impact of CDBG more apparent as I approach it. So again, appreciate the opportunity to present. Happy to answer any questions.
Chair recognizes Richie Nordstrom. Oh, excuse me. Oh, we have one more piece. Okay, sorry about that.
Hi, Jamie Tennis with United Way. And as the previous speakers alluded to, there's a lot of knowledge on the committee with the work that our own organizations have done around affordable housing and providing that insight. Part of that, as many of you on this committee know, is that we know a lot of the players involved in this issue and solving this issue. But as Michelle talked about, the capacity to manage and track these funds is intense. And so while we all know many players in this field, it is limited when you really take a hard look at who has the capacity to deliver on all of the requirements for the organization, for the clients that they will be serving. And so that is something that I must, give a lot of kudos to the city and their staff and the committee for developing the program with the LOI, with the reach to spread a wide net of finding interested parties, but then being able to weed through those to see who truly has the capacity so that it is a more efficient process for the committee, for the city staff, as well as for the nonprofits or other players who apply for the funding.
Thank you. Now, the chair will recognize Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the presentation, and if I may take a little privilege here is to introduce Laura Jones, who is the new housing coordinator for the Elevate Rapid City. You've been on the job for about a week now? Yep. So we're
Can we have her come up to the
hose of
microphone? At least then people can hear her as.
Yep.
It's fine. It's just, even if it's a couple questions, it's good to have it on.
Yes, I understand. Yeah.
We're feeding you a lot of information through a fire hose right now because you've been on the job for basically a week. So,
Yes.
And I appreciate the attendance that you were at the MAC group, the military housing group.
Correct.
I
yes.
can't remember what MAC stands for, but it's a committee of military housing folks. And so I just wanted to take this opportunity and a personal privilege to introduce you to the City Council, at least this committee, and welcome you aboard to
Sure.
help elevate Rapid City. So
Thank you. Yes.
good luck with everything.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to make a change. So, yes.
Very good. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you.
If I may bring up Michelle Schulke back to the podium, please. Michelle, you're acting as more of, your title includes the word manager in it. So being a manager of this, of all of this organization, and I consider this a blue ribbon panel that you've got for a committee. Can you share a little bit about what does a manager do with this job that you have?
Of course, appreciate the question. Every day is different, absolutely, and it depends on where we are at in the funding cycle. But really, my job is to help the subrecipients achieve the goals for the city. And a lot of what we do is technical. We're working through the regulations and figuring out the best way for them to remain in compliance and by doing so, ensuring the city remains in compliance. That is a lot of what we do. I really do liken it to spilled milk. There are some times where a subrecipient proceeds and we have to say, hey, that's great, but we need you to get back into compliance. And these are some ways you can do it. And then we might have another subrecipient that's falling behind. A pandemic hits and they have staffing shortages. So we address that. Really, it's to help the subrecipients perform the goals.
Thank you. And then you've also got a helper, if I may introduce her, or would you
Please.
like to introduce her?
Please do.
Yeah. Katie? Yeah, please come up, and we just recently hired Katie to assist Michelle in the office, and thank you for joining the city of Rapid City.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Please introduce yourself.
I'm Katie Lovett. I just moved here from Amarillo. I worked at the city there, but this is vastly different.
Yes.
Yes.
And Katie is primarily responsible for handling all the, well, shall I say, all the not only just reception work, but the administrative work too.
Yes.
Because the other day we were having a discussion about how to proceed with a process within Excel. And
Yes.
so you're the expert. So thank you for helping me out on it. If I can go back to Michelle again.
Thank you.
Just to make sure that you have said it, and I believe you have said it, LOI stands for Letter of Intent?
I'm sorry, yes, letter of interest in this case.
Interest.
Are they interested in CDBG funding? My apologies.
Yep, no, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we're getting the acronyms straight, and that's where I came out of, was a world of acronyms, and there's a lot of them that match up. So, in the work that you do in the committee that is helping you out, making the final decisions, the collaboration with the groups that they're involved with, but you've also got several connections as well to send out these letters of intent or LOIs. And what else?
That's right. So we rely on the committee to help spread the word, to share those public notices for funding applications, as well as when our reports go out as well. I do ask that recruit the city council members to share those when we send those out. Conversations. It might be as simple as, I'm thinking about this project, what do you think? And my response is always, well, let's talk about if this would be a good fit for CDBG funding. Especially during the consolidated planning process, we are involved in sitting down in community meetings and listening, really to get an idea of what all of the different needs might be, not just in one category or not. So that's a lot of what we do when we're doing our strategic planning is listening.
And a couple of other things here is the Hud Grants that come into the city of Rapid City. Is there many matching funds from the city that goes along with that?
Currently, we do not have a matching requirement, nor do we see a whole lot of locally provided funds from HUD. We do see a lot of construction projects who tap into HUD and other federal funding that's usually passed through the South Dakota Housing Development Authority. As Alan mentioned, it's very rare that an affordable housing project would only use CDBG. There just is not enough funds to buy that affordability. But as far as I know, and as far as I've seen, no other locally provided HUD funding is really tapped into here.
Out of the HUD grants, we are allowed to take, 10% for our administrative costs? Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Each HUD program has a different administrative cap. The CDBG program has a 20% cap.
20%,
Yes.
okay. And that's how we pay for your salary and Katie's salary primarily?
Primarily, currently Katie's salary is pulled from general funds,
Yes.
and a portion of my salary is pulled, well, most of it is pulled from the grant funds.
Good. Thank you. And then accountability and reporting. The process is quite, shall I say, in my world, it's painstaking. But can you describe a little bit about what accountability means for you and your department or division?
You know, there really would be no CDBG program if we did not provide the data to HUD. And so that's really an important component, that the subrecipients understand what they'll need to track. And once that's set up and they establish a process, it's not hard, but it is important. Some information that's required is race and ethnicity, income levels, whether or not there is a disabled person, or there's other categories, severely disabled person. If there's a person with AIDS or HIV, that data is collected. There is an elderly category as well. Is there someone 62 or older in the household? A lot of socio-demographic information is collected. We require that to be reported on an annual basis to us. We do compile that and then submit that to HUD with our annual report, which is called the CAPER.
Yes, the capers, we get those about once a year.
Once a year,
Yeah.
yes.
You don't get involved in wage and hour?
We do.
Oh, you do?
Yes, the construction type projects trigger Davis-Bacon and related acts. So what I do is review the certified payroll for every employee that works on every job that we fund on a weekly basis to ensure that they're paid the correct wage based on their work classification. I work with the DOL if someone's underpaid and if restitution is owed, and if there's a classification that's not on a wage decision, we ask that the subcontractor goes ahead and presents what type of tools and what type of work they're doing and present that to the DOL so the DOL can put their stamp of approval on the wage that that person's making.
DOL meaning the Department
Sorry,
of Labor.
Department of Labor, yes.
That's quite all right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll yield for the moment.
Yeah, Michelle, if you just have a minute, I just am a little confused on one thing. So when we're defining needs and how we're meeting those needs, are those needs defined locally or are they defined federally?
Overall, the program is principally to serve low and moderate income individuals. And that definition is households earning 80% AMI and under. From there, the local community gets to decide what that priority is.
Oh, okay, so the folks gathered here are some of those people that get to make the decisions on the needs.
That's right, as well as the general public. When we go out for public comment on our annual action plan, which will kick off pretty soon, that's another way we can garnish some input on what those priorities will be.
Okay, thank you. I yield, and I see no other lights, so do we have a... Yeah, motion to acknowledge by Lehman, second by Nordstrom. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. And we're on to item number 3, adoption of the updated non-union guide and an employee handbook. We're going to go to Mr. Weifenbach on this, although this has been asked to be moved to February 2nd. I want to be clear on that. So.
Madam Chair, I'll make that motion to move it to February 2nd, and I want to take a moment to comment on this. And
Okay.
Our HR guy's not here.
I saw Nick. Huh. Okay, well, we'll proceed
Madam
anyway.
Chair, yeah, Madam Chair, I'll finish my
So let's say
conversation.
we've got the motion by Weifenbach, second by who? Nordstrom, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item has been brought to my attention. Had it not been brought to my attention, I probably would have been apt to just pass this through, which leads to my, I don't know how else to say it, maybe frustration or disappointment in how it was handled. And I'm not exactly sure where we're going with this. My one particular item is the item talking about the health care benefits to the retired people or close to retired people. And I've had conversations about this and have a lot of frustration about this, and so some of my colleagues have too. And then to find it here to being changed, and my understanding was, at the worst case scenario, there was going to be a grandfather clause, or we were going to work some other way around it, but we weren't going to just give the opportunity to take this away from people. We have what I call institutional knowledge. We have a lot of young people coming into Rapid City to work, which is awesome, but there also is a need for the balance of the institutional knowledge of the people that we have that are working as directors and those types of things. And I'm not sure that they had input on this, and I'm not going to put them on the spot to ask them that, But I'm very disappointed that this even came to us in this manner. I don't know how else to put it. I won't never support it in this manner, this way, shape, or form. I think we've made that pretty well clear from the council. So it's disappointing. I'm not sure what happened. And when it does come forward, I want an answer to who's continually putting it there and why it's put in there. What does it serve purpose for these people to add stress to their lives that I don't want them just to say, you know, I'm done, I've had it, I can't trust you guys anymore. But this is what it perpetrates, and that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Jason Solomon.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll echo Councilman Weifenbach. What is disappointing to me is that we have some changes to some HR policies which are probably very good, but kind of it feels like, and I wish we had more clarification, but things are snuck in, such as we had a conversation about how we handle retirees and those who are nearly retiring. We made it very clear this past summer, we want to honor our commitments to our retirees and the employees that we hire. If we make any changes, we grandfather it in. Any effort to do that is going to have a big problem with this council. And it seemed like in the midst of perhaps some valid HR changes, that we want to make changes to the retiree program. And if nothing else, maybe that wasn't the case, but the fact that the employees should have an opportunity to fully review and vet this out to make sure that there's nothing major changing for them. And also, you know, we might look at it, but we may not see it the same way that an employee does. But it is frustrating to feel like the council and the staff have to trust each other, and many of our staff have reached out to us. But if it feels like something gets slid in, unbeknownst to us in the midst of a lot of other things, that kind of goes against the kind of conversations that we've been having so far, that's disappointing to me. So let me just reiterate, we intend to honor our commitments that we make. If we make any changes to our retirement system or anything like that, that's grandfathered in for new employees who know what they would get themselves into. If we try to mix in those changes in the midst of these other kind of policy changes, that's going to be a significant issue. So I would really encourage HR, mayor, whoever's in charge of these things, to get the input from the affected employees and make sure that they have enough time to review this, so that they feel like they've been heard, their feedback's been given, and by the time it comes to the council, it should be a pretty good process to where we can say, yeah, everybody's had a chance to review it. They know what our wishes are, and we can move forward with this. But it feels to me a little bit like this was done the wrong way. And I'm glad for the folks who have reached out to us, who are on the staff, to say, hey, will you please take a look at this, pump the brakes on it, so that we have more of a chance to review this to make sure that everything's on the up and up, as we all have discussed before. With that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't prepared to talk about this, but the short version is that we have been discussing with the legislators about if we can come up with some permissive language. I'm hoping to go to Pier somewhere around the first of the month of February to sit in with a group of people that will be talking to the legislators about this particular issue. Find out exactly where we're at with it. If we can get it amended, the state law amended, whatever it needs to be done, so that we can make it permissive language for the city, so that we're not breaking the law. And it's unfortunate we have to go through this process, long process, and it's raised some consternation from a lot of employees. So that's the short version, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to need a motion on this.
We got motions to continue.
Motion to continue, excuse me, I'm sorry. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? And it's continued to February 2nd. And I would encourage you guys to maybe have some private conversations with Nick Strout and get this settled and kind of washed out before we come back together again on it, and get us some real information. I don't think this is enough information right here. This one sentence, I suppose there's a lot of stuff attached to it. I didn't look at it, but I know we've had we've had hours of discussions on this, so we'll look forward to February 2nd. That takes us to item 10, acknowledge the 2021 annual activity report to the council. Director of Finance, Pauline Sumption, talked a little bit about this before we started this down our list of retractions. So I just kind of want to know more about where we are with our TIDs. You know, I think you've told us how many we have annually. You told us how many we're paying off, but how many still are hanging out there, and what's going on with our TID situation?
Sorry, I would have to count. Hang on a second. There are 19 still remaining at the end of 2021, if I counted correctly. I do know there are some that are pending. The TID committee met on one, I think it was last week, that the recommendation was to move forward with that one. But like I said earlier, it does look like we're going to have 4 that will pay off in 2022, so those also will be dissolved as soon as if they get paid off. Planning department will work on dissolving those. And by state law, we can have 10% of our valuation in a tax increment district. With what we have here, it's actually 3.03% is what is in the tax increment districts currently. And that includes those that were dissolved in 2021, so that percentage will decrease once I take those off the spreadsheet. So for the majority, they will be paying off. There are a couple of them that will expire before they're paid off, and the risk is on the bank and the developer. There is no risk on the city to make those loan payments after that 20-year time period.
Are you seeing an increase in applications as our city is growing, or is it just kind of at the same rate?
I am going to let Vicki talk about the application process, as her department is the one that takes care of that.
Thank you. Director Fisher?
Thank you, Madam President. We have been scheduling in several meetings with applicants that would like to put together a TIF package on some rather large projects. You know, we have to always remember that the low-hanging fruit in Rapid City is developed. So what's left has cost, and those are usually off-site utilities and maybe some drainage expenditures. The TIF seems to be a tool that works for them and it works for the city. So I would anticipate in the near future you could see as many as 3 applications coming forward on some rather large projects.
That gives me no heartburn. I like that. It seems like growth to me, and it's one of the tools in our toolbox, and we've never had an actual maximum on that. I know there are some communities that do, but I believe that we use this very wisely. So thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Pauline. And we have a few questions here. Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just an update for you is this is one of those public-private partnerships that works very well for the city. There's some pros and cons about these, but overall it's one of those things that doesn't put any more risk upon the city at this time. So I really support the TIF process, and looking forward to seeing at least 2 more one more that's coming up that we just had a TIF committee meeting last week on. It looks really positive, and it has the potential of paying off earlier than the 20 years. And then there's one other one that's out there that I'm aware of that has a strong possibility of paying off much earlier than what the loan requirement is on it. So I feel very optimistic. This is we'll be seeing some of these projects coming off the TIDs and being on the tax rolls. It looks very favorable.
Yeah. Director Fisher, I noticed that you were in the queue and you took yourself out. Did you say what you needed to talk about?
I did, thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll go to Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to just kind of help answer one of your questions about is there more, I think sitting through all the TIFs that I've seen, I think we're probably at a lull of, probably about the low amount of applications that we've had, but I think there's probably more in the pipeline. I know I sit on the TIF committee, and we just approved a TIF The TIF committee approved a TIF for the downtown building, which will have a hotel and it'll have retail, those types of things in it. So that was something that's important. Also sitting in on a meeting with the governor and talking about the $200 million they had available to the state, that they're working on the guidelines to make available for the cities for infrastructure projects. They're going to require a one-third, 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 meaning one-third from the developer, one-third from the state, and one-third from the city. TIFs will count towards that one-third. So I thought that would be exciting for you guys to hear, and I know the mayor mentioned it a little bit the other night at our meeting, so thank you.
So you just have meetings with the governor, is that what you're throwing in here?
Pardon? Not just me, no. There was other people.
Meeting with the governor. Anyway, okay, thank you, Ron. That does help, okay. And now I've got finance director, I wish they'd change this, Pauline Sumption.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out a couple other things. If you remember a couple years back, probably about 5, the average interest rate was looking at 9%. If you look at the current interest rates, there's a rate anywhere from 3% as the low up to 5.85 or 6%, I guess, as the high. So it's nice to see those interest rates are dropping. The banks have been also very good about dropping interest when their clients are getting close to their max interest that I can pay on that. That way, to get that TID paid off lower or faster, excuse me. I also want to point out the assessed base valuation for the TIDs on this list are at $203 million. And the current equalized value of those are almost $850 million. So we're looking at over $600 million in additional valuation to the city tax base that we will not have but for the tax increment districts, theoretically.
Great addition, thank you so much. And did I get a motion on this? Move to acknowledge by Lehman, second by Solomon, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Good discussion. Let's see here. Now we're going to go to non-consent. Public comment is open and closed because we have none. Introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6528, an ordinance repealing Chapter 1.08 of the Rapid City Municipal Code relating to wards and precincts and adopting a new revised Chapter 1.08 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. And this is a big deal.
So I did ask Jim to load the map, and there's 2 paper copies on the dais for you. If you look at this map, the gray lines are what the wards are currently, and then the colored blocks are the proposed new ward boundaries based on the census data that we received, as well as some other factors that I included in the memo to on the agenda summary sheet. You can see there's quite a bit of shift in Ward 2, and the reason why we had a drop down in Ward 2 is the purple, for those that can't see it that closely. There was a large amount of growth in Ward 1, and so we had to shift some of those residents out of Ward 1 into Ward 2. When we were doing that, we looked at dropping this boundary also. However, we also took a look at where our current elected officials are at for housing, and that would have pushed one of our Ward 1 representatives into Ward 2. So we wanted to maintain that boundary line so that we didn't have to worry about that. Also, that you can see there's some major shifting between Ward 5, which is the tannish color, and Ward 3, which is the pinkish color. Again, there's been some growth in some of those areas, and to shift those to keep the total counts within a 10% variance of our ideal balance, we drew some new lines. If you look at this line, that is Highway 16, I believe, Mount Rushmore Road. No, sorry, 5th Street. That's 5th Street. And originally we had moved it down here where it was the West Boulevard, and it would have split up that district to keep the numbers in line. Mr. Lehman, when he was at the meeting on Monday, requested that the West Boulevard neighborhood be kept together, which made sense to the rest of the committee, and so that is what we did there. Also, Jackson Boulevard becomes the line here to keep, just for points of reference. We looked at geographical boundaries as well as like communities. Ward 4 is unchanged based on census data. They were right where they needed to be on population numbers, and so we left that one unchanged completely. We did also, what's not on this map, but what is included under Ward 1 is the airport area, which has 0 population, so it does not have an impact on Ward 1, but it is also included as Ward 1. The numbers at the bottom show the variance. The Voter Act suggests that we look at the highest population and the lowest population and figure the variance and have that not be no more than 10%. And rounding up, we're at a 9% variance, so it's within what is recommended by the Voters Act. We worked very closely with Lori over at County Auditor's Office, Lori Severson, and we also drew boundaries that coordinated with the legislative boundaries, so that way we don't have split wards and legislative districts. That makes it easier on the election workers as well. So I do know too that Daryl is going to be putting this on the city's webpage, so that way it's available for the public as a front page item.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Chair recognizes Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I make a recommendation to send to council without recommendation. If I can get a second and retain the floor.
Please.
All right. Pauline, there's a lot to think about here. While I'm in Ward 3 and I seem to pick up the largest chunk of people and land and everything else, it is a little peculiar to me to see Ward 3 go up 4.2%, which is 15,610 people, and my neighboring ward, Ward 5, go down almost the same percentage. So they're going down a similar percentage that I'm going up at they're losing 4.1%, and they're at 14,308 people. Why not just try to get as close to even as possible for all 5 wards rather than stack Ward 3?
And I understand what you're saying, and honestly, before we added the rest of the West Boulevard in, we were pretty close. That added 600.
Boulevard was in Ward 5 before.
Correct.
So if they had kept West Boulevard area, would that put that 4%?
It would have been the east side of West Boulevard would have been in Ward 5. The west side would have been in Ward 3. And that was 654 people.
And what is it right now, the West Boulevard? And I agree, West Boulevard is a similar neighborhood, should share representation. Is that the current case right now?
Where it's all in the same ward?
Yeah.
Yes, it is currently all in the same ward. However, it's all currently in Ward 5.
Right.
So that all gets shifted to Ward 3.
If I was Ward 5, I'd probably have some questions about that. But I guess my preference would be that why not try to be as even as possible rather than have kind of load up a little bit more on one ward that could be taken a lot of different ways. And I don't want to make sure that everybody understands that these shifts that happen, which have to happen, and I understand it's tough, but when you have one ward gain and another ward lose at almost the same amount, if I were Ward 5, I'd feel like my role was diminished a little bit based on that. So, but I'm not Ward 5, but I'll leave it to Darla. And the reason I sent it to council without recommendation, because I do think the whole council needs to be involved in this conversation. And even more important than us is the public, to make sure that they have opportunity for input as well. So with that, I'll leave that there. I was kind of throwing those things out. Thank you.
Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a whole host of questions, and I'll follow up with an email later, Pauline, so we can, Monday, that I'm sure that some of the other council people will have some of the same questions. And I have not set through redistricting, but is there a handbook for redistricting? Is this a legislative or an administrative process, first of all?
So I will say that the proposal, the 3 times I've been involved with it, between Sturgis and here, has always been basically a staff/committee function.
So
And
first-
that they would bring the recommendation, but the legislative body has to approve the ordinance to approve it at the end of the day.
Okay, I guess we should identify that, and going forward, I know maybe for the future councils, we need to look at having some sort of process in place that they understand. 'Cause this is the first I've seen of it. We just got this yesterday.
Correct.
This map. We heard rumors of redistricting, but lately we've been drinking water out of a fire hose. And this is just another one of those things that we don't want to get wrong. And so my other questions were, who had input into this?
So the committee consisted of the mayor, the city attorney, me, Lori Severson from the auditor's office. Angie Talon was there to start with.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Angie Talon from GIS, because they have the program that does all this pretty stuff for us. Coy Sassy from the school district was also there, Lloyd LaCroix, and we also invited Lance Lehman.
All right.
And I apologize if I missed anybody.
No, that's fine, and I'll follow up with an email to make it, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but these are questions that I had. And then this question, I'm not expecting you to answer because, but I will follow up with an email, and I want to know what the guidelines were, what the goals were, and what the legal requirements were to be met. And then I'll follow up with an email, so I don't expect you to answer that right now. And then the other question I have, is there another option available right now, or is this the only option available?
Right now, this is what we are presenting as the best option that we looked at. Like I said, on Monday, we looked at another option that had West Boulevard split on that, and we decided as the committee then to include West Boulevard in one. I will say that Angie and Lori and I we were like the subcommittee that went through the data, looking at the numbers as far as the census blocks and trying to figure out the best way to move things to match, like I said earlier, the legislative districts, geographical boundaries, like communities, and making sure that the elected officials, basically making sure that we were in compliance with the Voting Rights Act.
Okay, and then the county has their own map, I'm assuming, too?
Correct. They're still working on that as well.
School district has their own map?
I'm not sure about the school district.
Okay, I'll follow up with those questions on email, not to belabor it, but those are, I'll need to, but going forward as a council, I would recommend that we make some sort of motion that puts into place a handbook for future councils. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
And Mr. Weifenbach, knowing that I've done this 3 times, and it's only every 10 years, each time it's been a little different. The first time I was involved with it, one of the city attorneys at the time had a map and pencil, because I was in Sturgis, we didn't have GIS, and she came forward with the proposals to the
Correct,
committee.
I just want to make sure we're following.
Yeah, it would be welcome, because in 10 years, I will not be here.
Right, and that's the case, I probably won't be either. I was thinking about that, my dog's 1-year-old, he might outlive me.
Right.
But we shouldn't outlive the council. The council will be here, and I want to make sure this is a proper, because there is political ramifications involved, with that. And nice thing about the city is it's not nonpartisan, so that helps a little bit.
Well, and we don't have the information in our census data as male, female, Republican,
That's fine.
Democrat. We don't know any of that stuff, so that's kind of nice looking at it blindly.
We are the elected officials. We got voted in. We have to make that ultimate decision. It would have been nice to understand this process was taking place, and I just want to make sure that we have it nailed. So that's where my concern. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Recognize Joel Landine, City Attorney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just suggest, one of the reasons we are a little bit under the gun and we're having first reading now is that I think ideally we would like to get the map into place before the time to circulate petitions for the municipal election. From a legal perspective, the biggest issue is going to make sure that the population of the wards are balanced, consistent with law. So I would recommend if any of the council have some tweaks or suggestions that you would like to be discussed, because really this is the starting point for you to make a decision. And if you're all happy with it and you approve it, that's fine. If you want to make tweaks to the boundaries, we're going to have to look at the populations. And while GIS certainly allows us to make those calculations and decisions much quicker, if any of you have or other council members have recommendations or some questions or suggestions, it might be good to get those in before Monday night so we could run some options and know what that does to the ward population numbers to make sure that we would know whether they would be compliant with the laws about having the population balance.
Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the presentation, Pauline. This is one of those opportunities where we get to pick our voters. I just want to make sure that we're not coming off looking like we are choosing who we want to be in our area because of who the voters are. I just don't want to come off looking like that. One of the other things that is that I sat through one of these about 10 years ago as well. And this is not meant as a criticism of the committee that was established, because I know all the work that had to be involved in it, but the time that I was on that committee was that there was probably at least a council representative from each ward was on that committee, including the personnel that you mentioned as well. So we all had an opportunity to bring our suggestions, and again, it's not a criticism what the process is right now, but it's just a suggestion for the next time around.
And I will say, memories lapse after 10 years, so when I was asked, who serves on the committee, I didn't remember that, so that's...
Yeah, it was my first experience at it, so that it's one of those things that get burned in, so burned into the memory. So it's just something for us to think about for the next time around. Thank you. I yield.
Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can digest this pretty quickly, but I'm not sure that the public can, so that was my biggest concern, was to give them time. I mean, we made it public today. Hopefully the word gets around. If people have concerns, they can give input also, so thank you.
Jason Sullivan.
Yeah, this is not going to come as a shock, but had I not asked a question in an email, we wouldn't have known it was coming up. I actually had to request that a council representative, at least our council leadership, be involved. When I found out there's been a committee that's met without any council involvement, at the last minute, they put our council president in there. So I agree that not having that kind of voice at the table, especially when you have other elected officials, county commissioners, mayors, those sorts of people in that discussion, I think it helps the process. When you're up front in the process, say, here's who involved, here's who's involved, here's what the process will be, here's what the timeline will be. Because we do have a deadline, because folks are trying to run in March, and where you live is really going to matter on whether you go for it or not. So it has really less about the current group of elected officials. We will all move along at some point. But the fact is, it needed to be an upfront process with the public input as part of it. So right now it's considered the public input. And I want to make sure that we provide that opportunity for the public to make sure that they have their voices heard in this as well. It may not be a big deal, and I hope it's not, but we want to make sure that voices are heard. And it is a little bit frustrating that we have to ask to be involved in these things. And if we don't ask the right questions, we would not hear about it until it shows up on an agenda. So you have to know the right question to even ask so that we are aware of what's going on. So thankfully, at the last minute, we were able to get Council President Lehman in there to have some representation from the City Council. Hopefully from here on out, we can make a good decision together. Thank you.
I would just like to add my voice to this. I believe that Director Sumption and Attorney Joel Landine had our best interests in mind, and the committee had our best interests in mind while doing this. Population shift happens, and then we have to change with the times. It might not be the perfect solution, but we have to start somewhere. I am not as distrustful of our staff and the people that run the city as maybe some of my counterparts. I do think you try to keep us involved and in the loop. So maybe this was the way that you wanted to start it out. I don't think that it seems subversive to me. So thank you for your work. And this is a good starting point. We'll have a look at it. We'll have some arguments about it, I'm sure. You know, Laura already doesn't like it, so, you know, just within our own ward, we're going to have some questions and some discussions. But I welcome that. That is the democratic process, and cities change. The population shifts. So this is the way that we're going to deal with it for now, and we're going to work it out. I have no question in my mind that the people on the city council can come up with the best solution for Rapid City. We've got a good council, and they will take all of the suggestions into mind while looking at this problem, or looking at this new solution, I'm going to say. So
If I
go
might,
ahead.
I want to say that it was not intentional that we did not have council leadership on there. It was an oversight, and we only met one time without Mr. Lehman, and no decisions were even made at that time other than to do with the subcommittee with Lori, Angie, and myself. I did also want to add that in Angie's absence, Adam has also stepped up to the plate, so he has very quickly had to learn this program and has also been a godsend to the process.
This is not easy work, and so I know that we just have to start somewhere, and I appreciate you bringing this forward, getting us the maps today as you did, and making it very clear what you want to change and the reason why. So I see Jason Solomon's back in the queue, so I'll accept Jason's statement, and then maybe we can move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You bring up a good point. We do have a great staff. I do trust Pauline. Obviously, this was around the holidays and stuff. This is more about what lessons can we learn to make sure that we're upfront in the process. It's kind of getting it on record. And then that way, these processes are clear and upfront from the get-go and have the right people involved. But obviously, we have a great team here at the city. I do not want to diminish anything like that. And I don't really put this solely on Ms. Sumption or anything. She's done well. She's answered all my questions on emails and conversations. So that part I don't have a problem with. I'm just saying when we have a process, it might be something that we as the council look at and like put it in writing. That say, here's how this should work so that nobody has to guess in the future. And so these are lessons learned for all of us to make sure that the right people are involved, and especially the community knows exactly what's going on and what the expectation should be. So thank you. I yield.
Just as a, for your knowledge, I've been working on the bylaws and policies. I have submitted first draft to President Lehman, and maybe we'll be adding some of those kinds of things as we go through that process. Yeah, our bylaws are embarrassingly old, so we'll probably be looking at that very soon. Okay? All right, so the motion is to just pass this to, or go send to council with with no recommendation, and I think that's a wise thing to do. I'm sorry if that influences votes, but we're going to pass this to City Council without recommendation. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? And the motion passes. Do I get a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Motion adjourned by Fire Chief Weifenbach and second by Nordstrom. We are adjourned.
That was good.